Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about It Comes at Night. This is the latest kind of art house horror film from distributor A24, and it has all the kind of creepy, silent ambiance that you kind of expect from them and expect from this kind of a movie. And this movie definitely has it, as you are kind of stuck in a house, shuttered away in the middle of a wilderness, only with some lanterns to light your way through a very darkened, without any sunlight or even moonlight to show you your way. You're stuck in there and kind of living with the existential dread of maybe everyone in the house tearing each other apart in a kind of both comment on isolationist and protectiveness and being protective, and how it can maybe ruin everything because of your fear and death happening to your loved ones. As really what It Comes at Night is probably the scariest thing at all, is humanity having to deal with having their whole world torn apart, and what that would actually feel like grief-wise after an apocalypse type plague would actually happen. In a secure kind of desolate home, you have everything established by Paul, who's played by Joel Egerton, and his wife Sarah and son Travis, and they're living there and everything's fine. You start off the film and the grandfather has to be taken out and killed because he seemingly has a plague, which we don't actually know very much about. They kind of like give you little clues throughout the film. Basically, you know very little. You don't even know if this plague has like a cool name or something like that, or if they're zombies or what it is. It looks kind of bubonic, but that's as much as you really know about it. You don't know that much, which makes it all that more scarier, because you're not exactly sure like how far they took this thing, or if this thing is worth that, or if they're just frankly just fucking crazy. You're never exactly sure, which is a little spooky. But then one night someone breaks into their house, which looks completely shuttered from the outside. It looks abandoned. They stop him, and after tying this guy to a tree overnight, that he has a family that he's trying to protect, so they let the family live there, as paranoia and kind of trying to protect their own eats away at all of them as things kind of turn out badly as they try to survive from this plague in this isolated house in the woods. I like that kind of art house horror has become a thing again, and this film kind of reminds me of when there was more art house horror, like in the 70s, before the slasher stuff really took off and Halloween happened and such. There were things like Ganja and Hess and things like that. They weren't necessarily, I don't know how popular Ganja and Hess was, but I can't imagine it was that popular. But there were kind of more attempts to kind of do more arty things with horror, which kind of went away when the slasher thing happened. This kind of reminds me of that, but it kind of has its main core, its roots in doing kind of a simple genre kind of a horror film and having fun with that genre. But it's so genre bare, it feels like, I've heard a lot of people say it feels like a part of an anthology horror series, but like very Rod Sterling, I think, because mostly when we're talking about anthology horror films, I think we all sort of know what we're talking about, right? This movie's kind of interesting. It flows slowly, quietly, like an art movie, but is still, because of A24, being put in kind of a wide release, which is great. I'm sure like this and The Witch and various other films will totally blow people's minds, and they'll be like, holy shit, like this is what horror movies can be. I have a lot of faith in the future of horror cinema. That this is being pushed on the average moviegoer, I think, is actually really cool. For most people who probably won't go off to make cool horror movies and are just going to see a horror movie with their girlfriend, I don't know if this movie really works in that angle. The audience I saw it with was mostly respectful, but then at the end they're like, what the fuck was that? They didn't seem to be very into it. Something like The Witch is an excellently made film, and I will go to bat for The Witch, even the people who didn't like it, who I think are super wrong, by the way. With The Witch, that was an amazing kind of masterpiece kind of a thing, and when I first saw it, I thought it was just more interesting, really, but I kept thinking about The Witch. And It Comes at Night, I don't think I think about as much. When I think about what it's saying, I think that's what makes this film so special. I don't think this is maybe as memorable and crazy good as everyone's talking about. This kind of reminds me of You're Next, where it's like super genre, and you can tell a good genre filmmaker made something like this, and it's definitely more experimental and thought-provoking than You're Next, but I don't know if it really like expands from that in certain ways. You know, it feels kind of like a very B kind of simple budgeted horror movie, which we don't really get things like this anymore, and I appreciate that, and I think it's actually very good at it, but it just like, I don't really love it. You know, it felt like throughout while I was watching it, I had to watch the entire movie to really appreciate what exactly it was doing. There's no scenes where you go, oh, that scene was so good, I'm so in it. It wasn't until I saw the film as a whole that I went, okay, I sort of get what it was doing and I like it, but it took me a while to sort of get there because it had such an odd flow to it, which I think is cool. I don't need everything to have a genre flow that I completely understand. I think a lot of what it's doing has been done by by other films before. It doesn't entirely do it in such a way that I'm fine with that. It just felt a little like, okay, I guess. It never completely grabbed me. It had a level of detachment to it that I sort of liked what it was doing. Artistically, I don't want this film to be something else, but what this film wasn't something that I could entirely attach to, have as much fun with as normal horror movies. I don't really know this director, Trey Edward Saltz. Apparently, he directed another movie, which I didn't see. I think he uses the actress well, from Joel Egerton playing this kind of survivalist father who's kind of like almost the real villain of the piece, from Christopher Abbott, who I haven't seen much of since Girls, and actually saw at a bodega earlier today. Everyone from Carmen Egigo, Kevin Harrison Jr. There's a white dog in it, and Riley Keough, which I just found out was Elvis's granddaughter. I like how this film plays in itself and plays within an apocalyptic thing. Apparently this the writer-director wrote this about grief. His estranged father who died. He wrote it many years ago. And because it's so open to interpretation, you could kind of put it in anything. And although for him it was very much about his father and grief and not wanting to deal with grief and kind of hiding yourself away, and probably some personal stuff as well, it's about that. But for me, and I think for most people, it's about being isolationist and very pro just your family and no one else. You could say this was kind of a metaphor for America or England or however many other countries have very, populist political ideas. And I think that's what It Comes at Night to me really means, the idea that these ideas will eventually kind of tear us apart. Christopher Abbott's character is a refugee who comes in, and how their kind of hatred and the idea that Christopher Abbott could be the evil because he's new and changing things and things are different, and he is not part of their family, so he cannot be bad. And that's very interesting, and I love thought-provoking horror. We're having a really interesting time with horror because I think these filmmakers who understood filmmaking and world cinema and great filmmaking also took horror seriously and understood that horror can say certain things. And It Comes at Night does that, but in a very open-ended way. This isn't like Get Out where it really spells it out for you, and excellently so, but I think it's a film that you obviously know what it's saying with that. It Comes at Night, you could say it's about a variety of different things, and I'm not going to say you're wrong with that. It's very open-ended in what it's doing. I think it's kind of beautiful that it does that, but it's open-ended in such a way that I feel like you can put all this stuff on it, but it also kind of washes in its kind of art movie horror-ness. This is probably for me kind of the average A24 art horror movie kind of thing, and I like art movie horror, I guess, but this isn't one I'm necessarily going to recommend. I'd probably go, oh, that was cool, and I liked what it was saying politically and the ideas within it, and it made me think afterwards, but it wasn't one that I necessarily love. And like The Witch, I reviewed and probably was like, it was more interesting than I actually liked it, but I actually liked it again and still thought about it. Even like a movie like Spring or It Follows, which was, I really liked It Follows a lot. Those films managed to say a lot of things. You can attach meanings to those and what it's saying and everything like that. Where It Comes at Night, it's very much trying to do that so open-endedly, it doesn't feel as interesting. I really like what they did with the character of Travis with Kevin Harrison Jr., who adds a kind of level of surrealism, I think, really to this movie. Seeing kind of, the idea that like when you're so isolated because of a plague, what's it like being a teenager in that, when you have like no social interaction, and how obviously he's really weird. He didn't really get to come of age the traditional way, or the way with like, other teenagers or television or the internet or anything. And so, having like this new family and a younger attractive family mixes all of his emotions up in his weird kind of crazy dreams. You might not think he's important and almost think he's like creepy in certain ways, but I don't think it plays it necessarily that way. It's just like, this is kind of the demented version of his adolescent years that he's had to live within. And I think that gives the film an interesting kind of personality, really. I like It Comes at Night. I think it's an interesting film. If you're someone who enjoys art movies and horror films, I think this is definitely something you should check out. But for your average horror film who, when I mentioned the A24 stuff and The Witch and art movie horror and stuff like that, and you're rolling your eyes and going like, that's fucking bullshit, I don't want to watch that movie, I don't think you should see this film. I think for people who like genre and reading into genre and things like that, this would be a very good movie. It's interesting, this movie's so sparse and spare and is more about the acting and the paranoia and having these people just in a house kind of eating away at each other. That's all there is. And my other option this weekend was The Mummy, and I'm kind of glad from what I've read, I saw this other than that. This is definitely a much better film and has made me think, and it was an interesting film to review and things like that, but I don't think it's necessarily as memorable or as interesting as The Witch and things of that nature that really kind of expanded my mind in certain ways in films that I really loved. I don't know if this is a film I really love, but it's a film I really respect and really like, and maybe, hey, I'll catch this on HBO or it's on Amazon Prime or whatever it ends up on, and I'll like it a lot more, and you know, you'll see my review of the next one where I'll totally praise this or something like that. It does kind of feel like that kind of disposable 70s genre thing where a director, you know, plays within it because the studio doesn't really give a shit. But I guess the difference is this auteur really does give a shit. There's a certain point when auteurs make genre films and do something interesting with them and expand them in something like that. There's other times when a director takes a genre and says open-ends it in such a way, which he does, where there's a creepiness to it. There's sometimes when they're going through the trees and you're not sure if someone's there or not, or if it's your mind playing tricks on you. Like the darkness and the scariness, the unawareness of this really plays within this film. That's really beautiful. But I don't think this is a film that blew me away or anything. It just felt like I saw one of those films on a Saturday afternoon and went, oh, okay, that was fine. And it did make me think about certain things, and I can understand if people have high praise for this because of everything you can think and everything you could do in your mind because of the ideas that have been planted in your brain that you can't get out, just like an evil plague. I think It Comes at Night definitely has all that in it. Whether you can unlock it or not, and what that unlocks within you, I guess, is up to you. Or it's just, you know, an okay, kind of fine, nicely made little art horror movie, but I don't think I'll ever see it or really think about it much in a week's time or ever again. So if you have seen It Comes at Night and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.